Hi, everyone. This is Eden Maybon of LightCycleAstrology.com. Welcome to the channel, friends. Today, we are taking a look at the astrology for the next week ahead for June 12th through June 18th, and I'm calling this Mantic Monday episode number 1. The theme I have picked out for the week is Dare to Love, but Test Drive Before You Buy. So we'll get into this in a moment. Before we do, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit notifications, and leave me some comments in the comment section. You can always find me at lightcycleastrology.com if you ever want to get a reading from me as well. Okay, well, let's go ahead now, and we'll pull up the real-time clock and take a look. Before we get into the mantic meaning of the transits, I like this word because it goes along with Monday, and also it relates to divination or prophecy. So the first major thing, though, that we're going to take a look at, or one of the major things that is happening this week, technically it happened yesterday, Sunday, June the 11th, but we have Pluto re-entering the sign of Capricorn. So that is definitely a big signature of the week. Today, we have Venus closing the gap to Mars in such a way that now the conjunction between the two planets really kicks off this week. Last week, we saw that Venus is, as the faster moving planet, caught up to Mars far enough to move into Mars's extended orb of power. And now we have Venus closing the gap a little bit more, and now Mars is brought into Venus's orb of power. So essentially, this is when the adherence or conjunction between the two planets takes place. So definitely, this is a major signature of the week. Between Tuesday and Saturday this week, we are going to have Mercury and Saturn in square. This aspect is going to perfect on Thursday. Between Thursday and next Wednesday, we're also going to have the Sun and Neptune in a square, and this is going to be perfecting Monday. So part of this transit is happening in the next week. So this is definitely a signature of the week that is kicking off, but it finishes out next week. And then if we roll the clock forward to Friday, we are going to see that Saturn is stationing to turn retrograde this Friday. So definitely another big, powerful signature of the week. And then we really finish out the week. If we go to Sunday here, a couple of things happens, but this is probably the biggest thing of the week, happens right at the very end here. We have the new moon coming through in the sign of Gemini. And this is really fascinating because it is so close to perfecting a square to Neptune. We also have the same day Mercury moving under the beams of the sun. So there is a lot of interesting, tricky dynamics at work here because Mercury is the dispositor of the new lunation cycle. Mercury, in other words, is the host of the sun and the moon at this moment. Mercury in his own temple, but moving under the beams. And this all happening while the new lunation cycle kicks off, as it is in an applying square to Neptune, is pretty interesting. These are the major transits that are coming through the week. So again, the theme for the week is Dare to Love, but Test Drive Before You Buy. Pluto moving back into the sign of Capricorn. This is a really interesting component of the week. Now, Pluto will be in Capricorn over the next 7 months through its retrograde, but remember that Capricorn is associated with things of the past and tradition. Capricorn is a little bit different from Aquarius, even though in traditional astrology, both signs are Saturn ruled. So both signs connect to the past and to tradition in a certain way. But you get a difference in Aquarius because Aquarius is one sign ahead in the season. So Aquarius tends to look at the past, tends to look back and uphold certain traditions, but it also has this progressive look towards the future, whereas Capricorn, being that feminine or nighttime sign, really is very much entrenched in the traditions and the status quo or the past. So you get this signature of things shifting back towards something traditional or connecting back to something of the past. The feminine also describes potentially the cultural things within society, because remember, it was the queen that upheld the etiquette and customs within the traditions of society on a whole. And this is really interesting because Capricorn is opposite to the queen's natural temple of Cancer, right? The moon's domicile, and the moon is associated with the queen. So there's a very interesting shift where Pluto being in Aquarius over the last couple of months, we've gotten to experience what this is like. And there is a certain amount of masculine or daytime activeness to Pluto that looks at the past, but also looks at the future. Well, it's almost like what's happening now is that progressive look towards the future is kind of pausing for a moment. And there's this return back to something a little bit more traditional. And the way you see the same themes being described in your birth chart on a personal level is just simply to ground this interpretation into a house topic. You want to take a look at what house is being occupied by Capricorn. And Pluto moving back into that house is going to reactivate some themes that have been major themes over the last 20 years. But there's something being brought up with those house topics again. For instance, let's say that Pluto is moving back into your second house. This could be something like going back to ways that you have made money in the past, or things that you have invested in long term, and sort of going back to that. Something like a house that you're paying off or you have a mortgage on, and maybe this is a time where you reinvest and refinance the house or something like that. But there's this sort of return back to something that has been something in the past or something traditional, and you have to ground that into the particular house topics. This trend towards traditionalism will be short-lived, however, as 7 months from now, Pluto will once again move back into the more progressive, forward-looking sign of Aquarius. But I think that you really see this already within the last couple of weeks as Pluto has gotten very close to moving back into Capricorn. I think you really have seen this trend. You have the Anheuser-Busch scandal. You have the Target scandal. You have the parents protesting at school boards meeting thing. And you also have just recently gamer Nick Merckx. If you take a look at the political outcomes of all of these things, and this isn't a political channel, so I don't want to get into the politics myself personally, but I think that these political themes that have been coming up as of very recently definitely speak to this sort of micro trend or trend back towards something a little bit more traditional, a little bit more looking back at the past, and that sort of theme. So overall, the theme is a return to tradition with this particular signature of the week here. And Venus conjunct Mars also coming through this week. So key words for this just in general could be maybe connecting to pride, authority, or legacy, because Venus and Mars are in the Sun's temple of Leo. So there could be topics coming up around our pride or our authority or our legacy. But I think if you broaden this out, there is a general theme with this transit that is transcendent missions coming together with transcendent pleasantness. Let me describe this for you. So, of course, Mars is in Leo, is really going to be brave, and he's like on a mission to procure something that is of higher or noble cause. Like it's, because Leo is the sun's temple, so there's a nobility to the sun's place. So it's like Mars is fighting on behalf of the king. He's not just out there quarreling or doing battle for no reason in frivolous ways or, semantical ways. It's like Mars really is after something of higher value. So there's like, we're on mission status, but the mission is having something connected to a higher noble cause. And this is being blended with Venus now, Venus being connected to pleasantness. So what are the ways in which we derive pleasure that have some higher noble calling? So these aren't the more base kinds of pleasures, like just, although sometimes in Leo, they can be self-gratifying, but typically this isn't going to be just the mundane kinds of pleasures of buying materialistic things or just having some good food, unless having good food or buying materialistic things has some higher noble purpose for you. And sometimes they do, right? Sometimes we need really important things, and sometimes just enjoying a good meal is really, really important. But that's kind of the quality of this. We're on a mission to get what we want, potentially at the tip of a sword, and we want to please ourselves in ways that have also a higher calling or purpose to them. So, for instance, let's say it's taking on learning a new subject, where there's just something very pleasing and there's like a lasting pleasure that comes from learning something you didn't know before, right? So maybe somebody is learning like a new language, and this is going to be something that lasts, it's like a legacy of their life. So there is a higher noble purpose with Mars and Venus coming together in the sign of Leo. Of course, when you have the lovers coming together, you could see a signature of very important topics coming up surrounding relationships or love or something like that. But I think in general, there is just this transcendent mission kind of quality mixing with transcendent pleasantness. So we're going after the things that are really, really noble or central or long lasting. Another way you could describe Venus and Mars coming together in Leo is good fortune and misfortune around a central part of your life. And that's because Venus is said to be a planet signifying good fortune, and Mars is a planet said to be signifying misfortune or bad fortune. So it's like things are moving down the track and there's some good stuff coming through, but there's also a little bit of challenge or some hangups that you have to deal with. And they sort of come together, or as like a pair. Another way in which you could describe this, I think, is the courage to have what you want or the courage to love. That's just the general thing. You have the courage to go after what it is you want, and you also have the courage to love. Leo being that sign associated with the courage of the heart, right? Now, the theme for Pluto and Capricorn and Venus and the Venus-Mars conjunction, all of this happening together, you might see something like returning to what has traditionally been really important to you as a central role of meaning for your life, right? You sort of get the quality of Pluto going back into more of a traditional place, and then you have Venus and Mars speaking to something a bit more lofty and transcendent. So I get the sense that there could be, you're kind of taking a look back, you're re-examining what is really, really at the heart or at the center of what is important. These are overall themes, I think, for the week and for the month ahead, I think. And if we pull in Saturn square to Mercury, along with Saturn stationing retrograde this week, this might be a critical moment of reflection or questioning regarding how fast things have been going forward. And if the way forward might just be taking a look back to weigh pros and cons or opposite viewpoints. This is because Saturn being in the dominant position to Mercury, Saturn, a god of opposites and of manifest materiality, right? Saturn describes all of the ways in which the one fractures into everything that we see in the material realm. So, and then of course, Mercury in Gemini is all about that intellectual darting between different ideas, the knowledge that the sun is about to enter over the threshold of the summer solstice and head back down towards the earth. So there's this sense in which the sun can't just rise and rise and rise more and more forever. There has to be kind of like a leveling out, so to speak. So you really get the sense that Saturn is sort of saying, oh, hold on now, I'm getting ready to go back and take a look back. Pluto's entering my sign that is more looking back towards more traditional things. You really, really get the sense that this is a moment of pausing or of contemplating what we are really doing. And Mercury moving very, very quickly in his sign of Gemini. It's like Saturn is really just sort of lassoing him and saying, hold on, Mercury, I know you're really going fast, but maybe the way forward is to take a look at the past or to re-examine pros and cons or opposite viewpoints or something like this. Sometimes cars break down when you get Mercury-Saturn squares as well. So there could be something around transportation or something like that. But I think the takeaway theme just for this particular square between Saturn and Mercury is that we need to take some time to think. We also have this week the Sun square to Neptune and the new moon in Gemini that is in square to Neptune. So I think that this is testing reality, biting the gold that you find, a test drive, organizing the language of dreams. So I always remember this thing about Neptune, that when Neptune was discovered, this was loosely around the time of the American gold rush or the Californian gold rush. I don't know where I got this from, but I remember that image of people going and digging for gold, and sometimes they would find the fool's gold. And to see if it was real, you have that image of the gold prospector all dusty and dirty in his in his hat and stuff, and he takes the gold and he's biting it on his teeth, right? He wants to see if it's real. So there's a sense in which the sun moving into a square with Neptune is probably about testing something that seems really too good to be true, perhaps, and Mercury being a little bit cynical in Gemini, going, I don't know, let's test it out. So there's almost like a test of what is real, a testing of reality, biting the gold. Or this could be, we have Mercury, the god of movement and transportation. So could this be like a test drive? This would definitely be a time where if your car breaks down and you go out to buy a new car, you definitely want to test drive the car. You don't want it to be just like, oh my gosh, this is my dream car. I have to have it. I will have this car. You want to test drive it. You want to make sure, use critical thinking to make sure that this is the practical and best car for yourself. It has that quality to it. And this might be organizing the language of dreams. This might be that things are what they are, but this is a time where Mercury in Gemini is about organization and language. And this connection to Neptune, the dreams that you can have, right? It's also good to hold dreams, because if we don't hold any dreams, there isn't much point to life. So this may be a time where we just need to cultivate the language or organize our thoughts around what we really, really want. What is the dreams that we hold? How do we articulate that? How do we organize the way to get to those dreams? Something like that. This reminds me of, I just watched, they had this Arnold Schwarzenegger documentary on Netflix, and I just watched it, and I don't know, I was just looking for something to watch, and I didn't really care what I chose, but in the trailer of it that comes on automatically when you're just scanning around, it showed his house, and I thought his house was really beautiful, and I'm building a house. So I was just connecting to this house because I'm building a chalet style house right now, and it showed his house being this chalet style house. So I was like, oh, I'm going to watch this. But actually, it was really, really good. I really found out and learned a lot about Arnold Schwarzenegger, things that I never knew, and definitely organizing the language of dreams. That is quintessentially Arnold Schwarzenegger. So if you want to get a sense of this theme in particular with the new moon that is coming through in the sign of Gemini at the end of the week here, that is definitely a good documentary to watch that really gets at the quality, I think, of this new moon coming through. Interesting that it is premiering on Netflix right now. So maybe there's a correlation there. Now, also on Sunday at the end of the week, we have Mercury entering the rays of the sun. So this is when Mercury moves close enough to the sun that his starlight can no longer be seen visibly in the sky. And this had a whole bunch of symbolism that the ancient astrologers ascribed to a planet that lost visibility. But essentially, one of the ways in which they saw this is that a planet becomes oppressed as it loses its own light. So very, very interesting, because Mercury becoming oppressed, receiving a square from Saturn, a god of oppression, but also Mercury in his own temple of Gemini. So this is a Mercury that is extremely capable. He's extremely capable of pulling off what it is that he wants to do. All of those feats of mental gymnastics, of language, of thinking, of critical awareness, of testing things. Mercury has the ability right now to do all of those things very, very well and with a lot of skill. So we don't lose the skill. We don't lose the language. We don't lose the articulation. But there is this quality of, like, we're operating under some kind of oppression with that. So this is the mind working under difficult conditions or circumstances, sort of feeling like the pressure to have the answers is really vital right now. Under pressure from bosses, maybe under pressure from our own ambitions, or under pressure from learning something, and perhaps the understanding of secrets or hidden things that weigh the mind down. That's because one signature of a planet moving under the beams was that it's no longer visible. Things that are not visible move into that secretive or hidden realm, right? So Mercury is working behind the scenes. Mercury may become aware of things that are hidden or secret, and it is operating either in that secret realm or sort of under the pressure or the weight of things that he's keeping to himself. So a very, very interesting week ahead. I think that you could encapsulate this particular aspect thematically by saying that pressure makes you clever, imaginative narrations are happening, and you can write your own story. So that's what I have for today. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. I hope you guys got something useful out of this. Please let me know in the comments what you think about this and anything that you're noticing. We will be back again for Mantic Monday, episode number 2 on next Monday. And we'll get into the summer solstice that is coming up at the beginning of next week, where the sun was said to be crossing over the gateway of man. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you back again next week for another Mantic Monday.